During the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, President Obama's former Attorney General, Eric Holder, made the rare but completely understandable decision to publicly criticize President Biden's Attorney General, Merrick Garland, for slow walking the investigations into Donald Trump. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to play in this video because the topic is near and dear to my heart, and it should be near and dear to the hearts of all of you as well. President Biden has been a remarkably successful president, particularly with respect to domestic issues. And I think Merrick Garland, his attorney general, the head of the Justice Department, the top law enforcement officer other than the president himself, seems to be a good and smart man. But he is not the man for the times. We need a Rottweiler in the Justice Department instead of a poodle. And Eric Holder, who was President Obama's attorney general, made the rare decision to publicly criticize, relatively gently, but publicly criticize Attorney General Garland and the Justice Department under Joe Biden because he thinks it's contributed to the slow pace of the prosecutions against Donald Trump and may contribute to Donald Trump getting away with a litany of crimes. We're going to play the clip, and then we're going to dive deeply into an article that came out a year ago, and I've discussed it in previous videos, but it's such an important source. It was an expose by the Washington Post, which revealed from DOJ sources that Merrick Garland did, in fact, slow walk the investigations into Donald Trump. But let me first play the clip with Eric Holder and Bill Maher.
I know you would never want to criticize someone who is your successor in the post, but I have to. Because Merrick, really, Merrick Garland, sorry, 4 years? Trump's going to delay his way. They say all four of them now. Yeah. Might never. I mean, and we need to say, even independents, even conservatives say they want to see the trial. They want to see the results of these trials. And if he can wait, he can run out the clock till the next election. Yeah. Then the trials will never happen, of course. So what is your assessment of how this was handled? Why could not it have been done quicker?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar, obviously, with all the inner workings of what happened.
You're not?
Well, I wasn't there. I wasn't the Attorney General.
But you know more than we do.
Well, but I don't know exactly what happened in these particular cases. But
it takes 4 years to bring a case to trial like this?
No, I mean, clearly the Justice Department could have and should have brought those indictments sooner. But it's also true of what happened in the states. And I'm really concerned that at this point, as you just said, the possibility exists that all four of these cases, for a variety of reasons, may not get resolved before the election, depriving the American people of a piece of information or pieces of information that they need to have in order to make a calculated decision as to who should be the next president of the United States.
And that may seem like tepid criticism, but again, it's unusual. Typically, former office holders, particularly of the same party, right? Eric Holder's a Democrat who served under a Democratic president. That same Democratic president used to be Joe Biden's boss. So there's a continuity there. For him to come out and say, yes, the Attorney General and the Department of Justice could have and should have pursued these indictments much sooner, to me is utterly damning because it's not just, you know, again, I have a degree in political science. I'm a politics geek, but I'm not an attorney. I'm not a prosecutor, right? I'm a layman with respect to that. So it's one thing for laymen like me from the outside looking in to say, yeah, from a legal perspective, it sure seems like this was slow walked. But to have a former attorney general say that the current attorney general did indeed and should have and could have been more aggressive and more expedient, that's utterly damning. So again, I want to refer you, we're not going to read the whole thing. We're actually going to play some clips deep diving into it from a Washington Post expose, which was released in June, late June 2023. It is damning. It's a huge indictment, pun intended, of Merrick Garland's Justice Department. I just want to remind you of two paragraphs here. It says, inside justice, some lawyers have complained that the Attorney General, referring to Merrick Garland, determination to steer clear of any claims of political motive has chilled efforts to investigate the former president. You couldn't use the T word, said one former justice official briefed on prosecutors' discussions, T being Trump. This account is based on internal documents, court files, congressional records, handwritten contemporaneous notes, and interviews with more than 24 current and former prosecutors, investigators, and others with knowledge of the probe. Most of the people interviewed for the story spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss internal decision-making related to the investigation. So I want to make this very clear. This is not speculation. This refers to people who are not only legal professionals, but prosecutors, DOJ officials, and many of them have, or the 24 that were interviewed, had knowledge of what's going on here. So with that in mind, just want to recap, and I'm going to play a video which does it. That way it's more entertaining than just reading, of what the Washington Post expose unveiled.
According to a damning new report from the Washington Post, we're learning that in the face of a once-in-a-lifetime danger to our democracy posed by Donald Trump, the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI also delayed, allowing Trump's role in instigating the January 6th attack to go unscrutinized for more than a year. According to the Post, quote, a wariness about appearing partisan, institutional caution, and clashes over how much evidence was sufficient to investigate the actions of Trump and those around him all contributed to the slow pace. Attorney General Merrick Garland and the Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco charted a cautious course aimed at restoring public trust, Republicans, in the department, while some prosecutors below them chafed, feeling top officials were shying away from looking at evidence of potential crimes by Trump and those close to him. But the report notes that the delay in looking directly at Trump started in the period shortly after the attack on the Capitol. Quote, Acting U.S. Attorney Michael Sherwin, senior department officials Paul Abate, the top deputy to the FBI Director Chris Wray, quashed a plan by prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office to directly investigate Trump associates for any links to the terrorist attack, deeming it premature, according to 5 people familiar with the decision. Instead, they insisted on a methodical approach, focusing first on rioters and going up the ladder. The strategy was embraced by Garland, Monaco, and Wray. According to the Post, the leaders at both agencies held on to that ladder-up approach to avoiding Trump, even as evidence emerged that Trump and his allies had schemed to overturn the election weeks before their henchmen laid siege to the Capitol. That approach can be traced to Garland's desire to turn the page from missteps, bruising attacks, and allegations of partisanship in investigations into Russian interference and in the 2016 election and Hillary Clinton's emails. But the report added, inside justice, however, some have complained that the Attorney General's determination to steer clear of any claims of political motive has chilled efforts to investigate the former president.
Which is the excerpt or part of the excerpt that I just read. So during this discussion, because again, this is more than a year ago, during this particular video on the readout, there were multiple people interviewed, and I want to play, I had more clips up, but I'm going to play real quick. I'll just summarize the second clip I was about to say, which is, according to that same expose, the Washington Post expose, which you should read, there's credible evidence that because of the House of Representatives, led by Democrats at the time, also investigating January 6th, that was what spurred on, finally shook the Department of Justice into acting, because they felt embarrassed that the elected branch, one of the electoral branches of the government, Congress, was actually going further in terms of holding people accountable than the Justice Department. That's a damning part of the expose. But I want to play a couple of clips here. The person speaking is not only a law professor, but is also a former Justice Department prosecutor.
But one cause is clear right now. If DOJ officials hadn't held Trump to this different standard, he would have been indicted months ago, not just for Mar-a-Lago, but also for January 6th. So ironically, in trying to rise above politics, Merrick Garland has enhanced the politics, because now there's a federal prosecution of a presidential candidate smack in the middle of a presidential campaign.
Absolutely. This is my complaint of Merrick Garland, too, that, and Elie Mystal, who is also here, one of my favorite progressive legal commentators, about to play a clip from him, in trying to avoid appearance of impropriety, you could easily make the argument that Merrick Garland engaged in impropriety, because trying to appear apolitical, once you take it too far, is itself a political decision. And again, Merrick Garland has gotten nothing for his pains. Republicans, in terms of elected officials, are not praising him. Republican voters don't believe that the Justice Department is less politicized as a result. Merrick Garland's decision in terms of restoring faith in the Justice Department has gotten him nowhere. So maybe you should just do the right thing and screw the perception. Food for thought. This is Elie Mystal.
That. And I know this is difficult for Democrats to hear, because we like institutions. We want to believe that good people are trying their best. But putting your faith into Garland, he's a mirage. You're drinking sand when you support this guy, because as we've seen in this report, and not just that, for his entire first 2 years in office, first year in office, let's say, What we saw is a person who was unwilling to do the work. Everybody knows that if you're a ref and you swallow the whistle and you don't call a foul, you're not being neutral. You're not being fair. You're helping the team that fouls.
Absolutely correct. That's true. There is what Merrick Garland's approach has been, again, is effectively to cut Republicans slack, to cut Donald Trump slack. We didn't just see it. The Justice Department, not just with respect to the January 6th case, but also with respect to the so-called classified documents case, in which the Department of Justice, the National Archives, batted around back and forth privately with Donald Trump for more than a year to get the government's documents back. Government documents, by the way, which contained sensitive national defense information. Okay. Donald Trump is indeed graded on a curve. He is indeed held to a higher standard. I would argue, based on Merrick Garland's actions and inactions, Donald Trump is given more slack, more free reign, more credit than President Biden. Merrick Garland didn't hesitate to appoint a special counsel to investigate, number one, Joe Biden for potentially mishandling classified documents, and also Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden. He hesitated. He took forever to appoint a special counsel for Donald Trump's classified documents case and for the January 6th case. So as far as I'm concerned, again, Merrick Garland's a brilliant jurist. He used to be an aggressive prosecutor. I think it was the Atlanta Olympic bombings, if I remember correctly. So he was a brilliant prosecutor, but he has the mindset for the past decade or 2 decades of a centrist judge. He doesn't have a prosecutorial mindset, in my opinion, which explains why he slow-walked all this nonsense. But he's the attorney general, not a Supreme Court judge. You are supposed to be the government's chief prosecutor, which means when you have a predicate to go after a particular target, you're supposed to relentlessly, but lawfully, but relentlessly pursue that target. And Merrick Garland hasn't done that. He has more relentlessly pursued the Bidens than he has MAGA and Trump and Republicans. So I agree with Elie Mystal. I think that Merrick Garland, in his zealous pursuit of appearing to be apolitical, has become wildly political, and he's earned no credibility from the Republican Party and from the right wing in this country. They still think that he is Biden's hatchet man, even though the truth is wildly different. So anyway, I think it is remarkable that former Attorney General Eric Holder has publicly criticized Attorney General Garland, and I think that if there is a second a second Biden presidency, Merrick Garland should be fired and a more aggressive prosecutor should be put in his place. Let me know what you think in the comments.